Hello everyone, and what a momentous day this is. We will finally, after working on this play for 4 months, since just after Christmas, finally reach the end of Macbeth. It's been emotional. Now, if we were in school, we would have had chocolate and cake, but we're not. So we'll have to have our celebrations virtually, but I suggest everyone, after this lesson, goes to trough a huge amount of cake. I certainly will be, together with a large glass of grape juice this evening. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. We still have the final 2 scenes to look at. Now, we must remember the conventions of a tragedy. That the hero, the main character, always dies at the end. The audience knows this and is waiting in anticipation of Macbeth's death. Malcolm, the true king and defender of the divine right, will be restored by the actions of Macduff, the righteous avenger. The audience holds 2 remaining prophecies in its mind. Beware Macduff, and Macbeth cannot be killed by anyone from woman born. Now, how will Shakespeare solve this conundrum? Remember also that due to the disruption of the divine right of kings, Scotland itself is sick. There is famine, there is disease, there is mass murder. Only the restoration of the true king can save her. Bear in mind the context here. Shakespeare wrote the play specifically for King James I, and it was first performed for him at his palace. King James became king after Queen Elizabeth and after she produced no heir, so the kingship fell to him. James was already king of Scotland, but now of England too, though both are still separate countries at this point. Think of the ending of the play as a great bit of Jacobean propaganda, appealing to James's ego as the play powerfully makes the point about the true and proper ruler. Keep all of this in mind as we focus on the thrilling end to Shakespeare's darkest play. The last scene we looked at built us up to the moment of the final showdown between Macbeth and Macduff, and that is the focus of this next scene. Act 5, Scene 8, page 69. So, please turn to page 69 now, and I will pause for a moment for you to do that. Macbeth opens the scene stating that he will fight to the death and that he will not yield. Macduff enters and shouts to him on line 3, "Turn, hellhound, turn." A suitably dramatic cry labelling Macbeth as satanic. Macbeth's response is interesting. "Of all men else, I have avoided thee. But get thee back, my soul is too much charged with blood of thine already." Now, he basically refuses to fight Macduff. He states that it is because he has too much blood of Macbeth's family on his hands already. But we haven't really seen an honourable side to Macbeth like this since the very start of the play, when he was worthy and brave. Now, is this actually real guilt about the murder of Macduff's family? Or is Macbeth really referring to his fears about the Beware Macduff prophecy? Macduff, of course, refuses to accept that. He must have his vengeance, as he shouts back, "I have no words. My voice is in my sword." There are no words that can express the grief of losing his family, but his sword can voice that for him. They fight. Initially, Macbeth is dismissive, telling Macduff that he cannot harm him, and he states the prophecy, again, almost desperately, "I bear a charmed life, which must not yield to one of woman born." This is clearly the one prophecy that makes him feel invincible. We are all born from women. The most important prophecy is easily solved. And in the biggest twist in the play, Macduff retorts that he was, from his mother's womb, untimely ripped. This is clearly a major revelation. Macduff was born by caesarean. Now, it's really important to note that this was not a standard medical procedure at the time. Hence the brutal verb ripped. Many women died in childbirth historically, so in these extreme circumstances, a woman's abdomen may be ripped open to save the life of the unborn child within. Now, the key point here is, once again, just how deceptive the witches are. Now, remember that key word we've talked about a number of times, equivocation, mixing truth and lies, being deliberately ambiguous. So just like the prophecy about the trees walking to Macbeth's castle's gates, this final plank of Macbeth's invincibility is stripped away. And Macbeth is now naked, metaphorically, surrounded by 10,000 soldiers and directly facing the man he is told to beware. Now, Macbeth admits that he is cowed on line 18. Meaning he's intimidated by the news. But the most telling thing he says is on line 19. Be these juggling fiends no more believed that palter with us in a double sense. Here, he finally rejects the witches and their equivocation. Clearly too late. He calls them juggling fiends. Now, think of that image of juggling. Are they juggling with Macbeth, as if he's a toy? Are they juggling with Scotland? Or both of these? He then tells us that they palter in a double sense. Palter means to trick. He should have taken that advice of Banquo after they first spoke to him. He again refuses to fight Macduff, who then delivers the command for him to yield, coward, give up, surrender, on line 23. Now, obviously, that is a serious insult for a man who is king, but who was also brave Macbeth with his impressive steel, previously brandished with utmost confidence and skill. Macduff's demand for Macbeth to surrender is accompanied with the revelation that if he does surrender, then he will be, as we're told on line 23, the show and gaze of the time. Basically, Macbeth's fate is to be exhibited to the public as a figure to mock and abuse as a prisoner. It would be painted on the pole that here may you see the tyrant, essentially reducing Macbeth to a circus sideshow, a figure of hatred for the rest of his life. Now, that's unacceptable to Macbeth, and he states that he will not yield to kiss the ground before young Malcolm's feet. His pride will not allow him to do that. He refuses to be baited by the rabble's curse. Baited refers to that barbaric sport of bear baiting. He refuses to be in that circus sideshow of hate. Listen to Macbeth's final words just before he dies. Though Burnham wood do come to Dunsinane, and thou opposed, being of no woman born, yet I will try the last. Before my body I throw my warlike shield. Lay on, Macduff. And damned be him that first cries, hold enough. So, despite all of the prophecies failing him, and despite the extraordinary odds, Macbeth throws himself into the fight. And he dies, as he began the play, as a brave and fearless warrior. The final words at the bottom of the page, Macbeth slain. The final scene of the play, Act 5, Scene 9, is about the restoration of order to Scotland. It is about the re-establishment of the divine right of kings. It rounds the play off. On line 20, Macduff brings Macbeth's head onto the stage. Now, remember, beheading is the standard punishment for traitors, and brings the play full circle back to the start when we are told of the beheading of a traitor that Macbeth had executed and had fixed his head upon our battlements. Now this same fate has befallen Macbeth. Macduff calls Macbeth's head the usurper's cursed head. Usurper meaning the thief of the crown. Macbeth's humiliation is complete. Macduff then tells us on line 21 that the time is free. It is a moment of national liberation for Scotland, a moment of celebration to be free from the tyranny of Macbeth's rule. All of the lords are united and shout out, "Hail, King of Scotland!" A very different hailing to the hail the witches gave Macbeth at the start of the play. That was a satanic hailing. This is a deeply Christian hailing. As the divine right of kings is restored and God's representative of Scotland is once again to guide Scotland into its future. The scene, and indeed the entire play, ends with a speech from Malcolm, the true king. Now, he reveals himself, like his murdered father Duncan, to be a generous king. He tells his thanes, at the top of page 71, that he will reckon and make even with you, meaning that he will reward them for fighting on his side. We are reminded of how Duncan rewarded Macbeth generously at the start of the play, only to be betrayed. Interestingly, he says that those thanes will now be called earls, no longer thanes. Now, earls is an English title, and again, we wonder if this is more English propaganda written for James and imprinting English traditions onto a Scottish culture. He tells us that all of those who have been exiled, those who have left in Scotland in fear, can return, and that he will produce forth the cruel ministers of this dead butcher, meaning that he will hunt down those who assisted Macbeth in his brutality. Now, butcher is a really great one-word quotation to describe Macbeth. Worthy, brave, tyrant, butcher. He's brutal. It's dehumanising. Malcolm's final statements tell us that he will heal Scotland's problems. By the grace of grace, by the will of God, we will perform in measure, time and place. He will do what is needed as guided by the hand of God. The final words of the play confirm that he is to be crowned at Scone, just as all Scottish kings, including Macbeth, had before him. And there we are. Order is restored, Scotland can heal, Macbeth is dead. Now, as always, your task is to complete the annotations for these last two scenes using the PowerPoint attached. And this afternoon, rather than beginning a new task, you need to check back through your entire text and check whether you are fully annotated before we move on. It's very important here that you think of the bigger picture. The world will begin turning again, and you will be sitting a GCSE on this text in approximately 55 weeks' time. Now, for this afternoon, I will also put onto Classroom a number of links to various videos that you should focus on if you have completed your annotations. Next week, we'll focus on preparing for and completing our assessed essay. And I can tell you now that the topic for that will be the theme of guilt in the play. So you can also be thinking about getting your ideas together for that. But for now, well done. And that is our second literature GCSE text completed.